What's the cringiest Pride-branded item that you've ever come across?
So ever is difficult, but this year it is almost certainly the Target little toy truck that has the lesbian flag on it, and it says, "Move it." Sort of like a lesbian U-Haul joke.
Right, yeah.
Which, like, given present political circumstances is very funny to me because it's sort of Target being like, by the way, like, are y'all still moving in after the first date? It just reads like so insulting.
Just checking in on the stereotypes here in 2025.
Yeah. I appreciate the decoding. I had no idea what was going on with the truck. For me, it has to be the Lockheed Martin socks. They just say Lockheed Martin and then have rainbows.
With
there's not much more
them.
to it. There's no explanation needed here.
Can I just, right off the bat, just say something incredibly cancel-worthy?
Please!
So, I cannot condone Lockheed Martin, of course. However, it brings me no pleasure to report that they have, the best-looking Pride collection.
My God, if you had Control F'd my notes in preparation for this podcast, you would have come across Lockheed Martin north of a dozen times. Consistently the butt of Pride corporatization jokes.
This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about. I'm Molly Roberts, a columnist at The Post.
And I'm Drew Goins, author of the Today's Opinions newsletter. It's Pride Month. And this week, we're going to talk about how the atmosphere around this annual celebration of the LGBTQ plus community is feeling this year.
The Trump administration has targeted trans Americans in executive orders, canceled over $800 million in funding for research on LGBTQ health issues, and even asked the Navy to strip gay rights icon Harvey Milk's name from one of its ships. The Department of Education has announced that June is actually dedicated to celebrating women now, so thank me for my service. Big businesses seem to be getting the message. They're eschewing the usual rainbow Twitter avatars, coffee sleeves, and other merchandise, and pulling back their support for Pride celebrations across the country.
But was corporate sponsorship ever that important to Pride, or did it just dilute the political roots of the event? And how might today's political atmosphere change how we celebrate? Today, to get into all of that, we're joined by former Post Opinions contributing columnist and now author of his eponymous Substack, my friend John Paul Brammer.
Hello.
Let's start with talking about just this whole corporate sponsorship situation. I think it's important to note that all along, a whole bunch of us have not liked how corporate Pride has become over the last half-decade, decade even. That it often felt more like marketing than actual genuine allyship. So what do the two of you think about the way these brands stick a rainbow on their logo and say Happy Pride in June? Has it ever felt sincere to you?
They sincerely wanted to make money.
That is exactly what I was going to say. Stole my zinger. Go on, though.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty clear that was a good opportunity for them. I guess there are two schools of thought on how bad that is. The first would be, sincere or not, the more widespread the affirmation that it's okay to be gay or whatever, the better. And that, every business and their mother turning themselves rainbow for a month sent the message that it's no longer cool, no longer normal to be homophobic. And, that's not as good as enshrining gay rights in the law or in your workplace practices, but it's better than nothing. And then the alternative school of thought would be performing Pride lets these companies off the hook for doing any of those things. And also, Pride isn't supposed to be within the bounds of, quote-unquote, normality. It's supposed to be transgressive, radical,
right.
Pride's a riot, etc.
Yeah. JP, do you kind of ascribe to that same dichotomy that Molly was explaining? And if so, which camp do you find yourself falling into?
Yeah, I know that ideologically speaking, according to my politics, where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to say, which is that, Pride, corporatism equal bad,
right.
Pride's supposed to be a riot, et cetera, et cetera. We don't love when Deutsche Bank rolls their float down the street or whatever. Deutsche Bank, by the way, being one of the weird places that actually doubled down on their Pride support this year.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny.
A non-U.S. corporation, though, interesting, right?
Yes, quite funny. However, I'm also sort of looking at it this way, and this is some searing political insight from yours truly, so brace yourselves, but we live in a very capitalistic, consumeristic world. And so Pride merch, Pride collection, corporations doing Pride, it really functions primarily as a bellwether for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny. Like every year, people in our community just get this feedback on how people are feeling about us that year.
Yeah.
And so this year it is sort of like, yeah, we're not really feeling y'all. We thought you were maybe more normal a few years ago, and we sort of think that you guys are freaks again, which is a funny annual tradition to me.
Yeah, the State of the Community report. I have long experienced this kind of merch and brand takeover as a bellwether as well. Incredible drag name, by the way. Bellwether. Please welcome to the stage.
Belle.
Belle.
Was at Stonewall.
Bellwether threw the first brick at Stonewall. Like in years past, we all kind of like grumbled about, the like new rainbow Twitter profile picture, whatever. But ultimately, I found it so soothing that this kind of last mover who only throws its weight behind a cause when it seems that the consensus is rock solid was with us, right? And then suddenly, the other thing about the corporate community is that it will be the first to remove its support when a consensus looks shaky. So it is the opposite of soothing to have the withdrawal this year. And I will say, I don't want to suddenly become the person going to bat for corporations on this podcast. We're going to leave that to Molly as her contribution to the LGBTQ plus community as an ally. She'll fall on that grenade for us on this podcast. But
I love Lockheed Martin.
When I want to point out, though, that like where interests have aligned, corporations have done material good for the queer community. If you look back to the 2010s, there was a whole raft of religious freedom legislation that red states tried to push through. And the minority Democrats opposed it, activist groups opposed it. But it wasn't until the business community deciding that, this is the direction the wind is blowing and this is going to be bad for business, it's not until they came out that these laws went down in flames. So it's like a strange bedfellows situation, but, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, right? It's very funny to see the double down, too, this year that a couple companies are making, because I think that the ones that feel most insulated see this as another opportunity for profit, where they can say, these other brands are pulling out, but I'm going to stick with you. I got an email from Framebridge, the framing company, that said, our values are, quote, stronger than ever and not subject to wind changes or external pressure. And I was like, okay, yes. Hell yeah. Well, then I got a follow-up email about what their material contribution was going to be. And the details are like, for one evening in June, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., any Framebridge proceeds, 10% of them will go to HRC. It was like, okay.
In person only.
Yeah, exactly.
I think every year, we get a lot of apologies from companies as well for missing the mark.
Yeah.
I recently saw an apology from BarkBox. I don't know if you're aware of the BarkBox controversy.
I am sadly not.
Pray tell.
Okay, so BarkBox it's like they give you a box of goodies for your dog once every month or few weeks or whatever. And a memo leaked about their take on Pride this year. And it said something along the lines of, well, if we're going to do Pride merch, then we should probably also do MAGA merch because it's politically infused or
These
whatever.
are right on the same plane, sure.
Yes. And so BarkBox then had to send out an apology to everyone saying, no, actually, we are celebrating Pride this year. We see you, we celebrate you, woof, etc. And I put all that out there just because it is such a bizarre annual thing to have corporations just being like, yes, okay, we feel it is safe to express public support of the LGBTQ community this year or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is primarily for straight people.
Yeah.
Or I guess non-LGBTQ people. I never think of it as oh, this Pride collection is really going to take off amongst the LGBTs this year. I'm going to see everyone wearing that shirt. I think that we don't buy stuff like that. It's for allies, right?
I think people outside of the coasts and big cities, I do think queer people in, Kansas, in Arkansas, go to Target and where there's a much smaller community. And if they see a rainbow tank, maybe they do buy that. I think that milieu is very different
When
from...
you said tank, I was thinking like Lockheed Martin merch, like tank for a second. It took me a while.
Lockheed Martin will be giving the LGBTQ community a tank this year. They're putting their money where their mouth is.
It's iconic.
When I'm back in Oklahoma and I see a pride flag in the coffee shop in my hometown, it hits so much harder than seeing it in like a Brooklyn coffee shop where it feels kind of perfunctory, right? Where it's just like, yeah, of course you would. Like, what else would you do? So it does depend a lot on where you are. But I do think it's like supportive aunts, you know, who really love the Target Pride collection.
Yeah.
And I love that for them. I do find it very wholesome when people who have a queer family member, a daughter, a son, a cousin, a nephew, and niece, and they're just like, yeah, I just want them to know that I support them this year. And I think that corporate pride stuff can go a long way on that front because the corporation is sort of a stand-in for a supportive aunt in that situation.
Yeah, so as fewer corporate sponsors get involved in Pride and the supply line to supportive aunts dries up, what are the other consequences? How does Pride look different this year with fewer corporations involved?
Yeah, my understanding is that a lot of the Pride festivals are facing severe budget shortfalls because of this. On the other hand, there are some where they've said to the community, well, can you raise the money to make up the difference? And the community has. So that's a positive outcome. That's kind of more authentic than relying only on the brave corporations like Deutsche Bank.
Yeah, World Pride is happening this weekend in DC, and it feels like this year is a little less party focused, I guess. For so long, it has felt like the protest political rally element of it has been auxiliary to just let's have a fun time and let's party and let's dance and let's celebrate queer joy, which I think is absolutely critical. But there is a big rally planned on Sunday after all of the parties, a march from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol. And I'm very interested to see this year whether there's a recapturing of that kind of initial spirit. There is a world in which the silver lining of corporations pulling out and shaking our confidence in the consensus of gay is okay lights a fire under our butts again. And we reconnect with the political nature of everything. But I also worry that those muscles have atrophied for at least large segments of the community. I think if you look at trans women of color, right, those muscles never atrophied for them because they have had to continue fighting this entire time, and there's been not an inch that they could give up. And that raises whole questions about the coalition nature of Pride and this amorphous group. I think we can get into that after the break, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this pulling out by corporations will be a little bit of cold water on the face of the Pride movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the slogan. San Francisco's theme is queer joy is resistance. New York has rise up, pride in protest. A slogan only goes so far. I guess we'll see what it looks like in practice. But we're going to talk more about the politics of Pride these days right after the break.
Welcome back. I'm Drew Goins, and this is Impromptu. So, obviously, the political atmosphere in the United States has shifted recently. Not only is President Trump rolling back rights for transgender people and slashing HIV prevention programs, but state legislatures have introduced hundreds of anti-LGBTQ plus bills over the last 2 years. JP, you recently wrote a piece on your Substack called Shelter, which I exhort everyone to check out. And you have this great quote in it that says, "Every year on this rapidly heating earth that I've celebrated Pride, it's been presented to me as, quote, more important now than ever. I've never once experienced a Pride that was announced as, quote, roughly as important as last year's." It feels like, you know, it was a little boy who cried wolf for years where people said more important now than ever. Look, you know, the 2017 Pride, it felt like we were still kind of coasting off marriage equality. 2016 Pride for sure. But to me, this year feels a little different. The national climate feels very different. I'm going to ask a question that might sound very hackneyed. Is Pride more important now than ever, or does Pride just not matter? Are we post-Pride? Has it blown up?
I mean, every year I do hear it's more important than ever, but as I said, like every year I do believe it.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly because when you're existing in the present, you don't know what's ahead of you. It does feel that way. I mean, even back in like 2017, I was just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I mean, who are they going to come after? There's always some pressing reason to feel that way.
Yeah.
But it does feel, and I'm going to say it,
Oh,
that Pride is more important now than ever.
oh, he said it.
Drew Goins. I mean, that's how I feel. Genuinely, I'm scared. I am quite scared. I identify as scared.
Yeah, it does seem to me that Pride has been swept up a bit in the larger vibe shift on wokeism, to borrow a bunch of terms that we say too much these days. I mean, stores were drawing the little rainbows on the sidewalk chalkboards before any of the shifts in 2020 about policing, but society is sort of conservatizing on those things, and perhaps Pride is getting lumped in with this host of other increasingly disfavored progressive causes. And of course, the other component is the anti-trans trend. And I suppose it's not really viable for those who are on board with the anti-trans trend to say, well, I'm down with the LGB, but I'm not really about the T and the Q.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me started on the plus. And again, there are two sides to that. On the one hand, perhaps it's a shame, this lumping together.
Yeah.
On the other hand, maybe it's just honest. You're making it very obvious that you're bigoted when you become anti-rainbows in general.
Right. Yeah. I think it speaks also to the unruliness of the coalition that I mentioned before the break.
I was kind of hinting at that at my Substack, that the point is really that we only are all in this together because other people decided they don't like us, that we are in some way deviant. And so I do think that this Pride, there's a good chance that we will see the community be even more itself, because the reason we exist in the first place is to bulwark against other people's prejudices, other people's bigotries.
Yeah.
If I had to characterize Trump 2.0 compared to Trump 1.0, it is sort of this feeling of, well, we don't have to hide our contempt anymore. We can finally just be cruel. We can just say it. We can put it out there and there will be no consequences, because that was something that we had to worry about years ago, but not anymore. And I do think that when you put that energy out there, you will see vulnerable people start grouping together even more and seeking each other out. And so I do think that this Pride has the opportunity to bring people together in a way that we haven't seen in a very long time.
I totally agree, JP. I think we are also at this crossroads where we have to decide as a community, in the face of retreating support, whether we respond with defiance and fire, or whether we try to go back to a place of gentle coaxing and convincing. Because I think, and this is very, centristy lib of me, I think we have gotten into some trouble with this posture of, educate yourself, right? Because I think there are a good number of well-meaning people out there who can be won over with honey rather than vinegar. I don't think that's everybody. Clearly, we have seen loud and clear that that is not everybody. But I think we leave some gains on the table by eschewing what worked really well last time, which the shorthand of it, if we want to dismiss it, as respectability politics, right? Of, Will and Grace and Modern Family, whatever. But I think that as we hold on to each other and stand tall, we need to do that without completely shutting out people who are open to coming around to supporting us or coming back around to supporting us with a little bit of hand-holding.
I think the reality is every year we can talk about what kind of response we should have, but we're going to get every response. There are going to be people who are very much in line with, we need to win the corporations back with good behavior. And you're going to have people who say, no, sit your straight ass down and educate yourself, just because I don't want to educate you. I don't owe you anything. And so you're going to get that broad diversity of thought on the subject. And I guess that's what Pride looks like to me. It just looks like an overwhelming array of emotions and events and feelings.
Yeah, I remember my first Pride, and it felt at once so simple without all of these complications, and also so huge. I was wearing like a little like rainbow tank top, and I felt like I was making the world's largest statement. It was in Norfolk, Virginia, and I was only out to 20% of the people in my life. And I didn't go to any parties. I went to festival with booths and information on, legislation and everything. And then there was an enormous thunderstorm and the whole thing got canceled. And over the years, it has become so much less of that. And it has become so much more party and just fun and having a good time with my little gay friends. And that's a beautiful thing too. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily pride. What I keep thinking about is an op-ed in Post Opinions way back in 2018 by Anthony Oliveira. We'll put it in the show notes. And he wrote at the end of June and said, Pride Month is over. Welcome to Wrath Month. And was making the point that Pride had become so co-opted and had changed so much that it was time for something else for the community. And he writes, "You have co-opted our pride, but you cannot have our rage." And I thought that was really powerful. I think I'm not quite to the point of giving up on pride, but the way it is constituted now has changed a lot.
Yeah. And I think, now is an opportunity for us who are becoming veterans of pride to let the youngins know who maybe came out in a more accepting, tolerant environment where there were pride collections galore from corporations, and let them know, hey, it wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to be like that in the future either. It all depends on what we do and who we advocate for, and we have to fight for it. I know that my education in where our rights came from and how we were able to claw our way into a place where I could live openly as a gay man in Oklahoma, that was something that I wouldn't have known about if I didn't have queer elders sitting me down and being like, hey, I was there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what pride is for. You can really let someone know they're a part of a legacy, they're a part of a tradition, and that in the end of the day, we are here to look out for each other.
On that note, I think we will wrap this up. Before we go, JP, do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, go read my latest Pride piece on johnpaulbramer.substack.com.
It's so good. It was so great talking to you both. JP, thank you for coming. And Molly, thank you for your allyship. This month's about you, Mama.
I'll see you in a few weeks for Wrath Month.
See you, Mother. This episode was produced by Slay Queens Hadley Robinson and Regina DeHeer, edited by Mother Jasmine Green, and mixed by the sickening Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne, who are also great. I just ran out of tropes. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please send us your thoughts about Pride this year by, as always, emailing impromptu@washpost.com. And be sure to tune in every Tuesday to hear our colleague Dana Milbank tackle the biggest political news of the moment. Talk to you next week.